"Don't talk," the prisoner whispered through the bars. The Texas female police officer froze, her hand still resting on her holster. At first she thought it was a trick, another inmate playing games. But then she saw his eyes, sharp, urgent, terrified. And what he revealed inside that jail would not only save her life, it would shock everyone who heard it. Stay with me until the end, because this story will leave you stunned. Officer Maria Santos had been walking these corridors for 8 years. She knew every sound, every shadow, every trick the inmates tried to pull. The night shift at Harris County Detention Center was supposed to be quiet. Most prisoners were asleep by 11, and the hallways echoed with nothing but her footsteps and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. But tonight felt different. Tonight something was wrong. It started with the silence. Too much silence. Usually there would be snoring, maybe some restless movement, the occasional cough. But cell block D was dead quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. Maria's radio crackled softly on her shoulder as she made her rounds, checking each cell carefully. Everything appeared normal until she reached cell 47. Marcus Williams sat on his narrow bunk, his back straight, eyes wide open, staring directly at her. He was a lifer, sentenced for armed robbery. But in all her years working this block, he had never caused trouble. He kept to himself, read books, and stayed out of fights. But tonight his face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. "Officer Santos," he whispered so quietly she almost missed it. "Don't talk, just listen. Maria's training kicked in. Never show weakness. Never let an inmate think they have control." She stepped closer to the bars, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio. But something in Marcus's voice stopped her. It wasn't threatening or manipulative. It was desperate. "There's going to be an ambush," he continued, his voice barely audible. "They're waiting for you at the end of the hall. 3 of them. They have weapons." Maria's heart started beating faster. She glanced down the corridor, but it looked empty, just like always. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows between the cells, creating dark pockets where someone could hide. She looked back at Marcus, trying to read his face, trying to decide if this was real or just another prison game. "Why are you telling me this?" She whispered back, surprising herself by lowering her voice to match his. "Because you're different," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving hers. "You treat us like human beings. You don't deserve what they're planning to do to you." The radio on Maria's shoulder crackled again. Dispatch checking in for her hourly report. She had 30 seconds to respond or they would send backup. But if Marcus was telling the truth, calling for help might trigger the attack early. She needed to know more. "Who's waiting for me?" she asked. "Rodriguez, Thompson, and the new guy, Jackson. They've been planning this for weeks. Rodriguez has a shiv made from a toothbrush handle. Thompson has a sock filled with batteries. Jackson, he's got something worse." Maria knew all 3 names. Rodriguez was serving time for assault. Thompson had a history of attacking guards. And Jackson, he was new to the block, transferred just 2 weeks ago from a maximum security facility upstate. His file was thick with disciplinary actions and violent incidents. "What does Jackson have?" she asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Marcus hesitated, his hands gripping the edge of his bunk. "A key. He somehow got a master key to the cells. They're planning to let others out once they finish with you." The implications hit Maria like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just an attack on her. This was the beginning of a riot. If inmates got access to the cell keys, the entire block could be compromised within minutes. Dozens of violent criminals could be loose in the facility, putting every guard, every worker, every person in the building at risk. Her radio crackled again. This time the voice was more insistent. "Unit 7, please respond. Status report required." Maria looked down the hallway again. In the distance, she could see the security checkpoint where she needed to log her patrol. It was about 50 yards away, past several cells, around a corner, and through a heavy metal door. Normally, it was a walk she had made thousands of times without thinking. Tonight, it felt like walking into a trap. "How do you know all this?" she asked Marcus. "Because they tried to recruit me," he said, his voice filled with disgust. "They thought because I'm doing life, I'd have nothing to lose. They wanted me to help block your escape route. I told them I wasn't interested, but I've been listening to them plan ever since." Maria's training told her to call for backup immediately, but her instincts told her that Marcus was telling the truth. She had seen how the other inmates looked at her lately, how conversations stopped when she walked by, how some of them smiled in ways that made her skin crawl. She had dismissed it as typical prison behavior. But now it all made sense. There's more, Marcus continued. Jackson didn't just get that key by accident. Someone on the outside is helping them, someone with access to the facility's security systems. This whole thing is bigger than just an attack on you. The radio crackled a third time. Unit 7, immediate response required. Are you Code 4? Maria had to make a decision. She could call for backup, but that might spook the attackers and cause them to scatter, only to try again another night. Or she could try to handle this herself, using Marcus's information to turn the tables on the ambush. Either way, she was putting her life on the line. She looked at Marcus one more time, studying his face in the dim light. 8 years of working with criminals had taught her to read people, to spot lies and manipulation. But all she saw in Marcus's eyes was genuine concern and fear. Not fear for himself, but fear for what was about to happen to her. If you're lying to me, she whispered. If this is some kind of setup, I'm not lying, Marcus interrupted. Officer Santos, in all the years you've worked this block, have I ever lied to you? Have I ever caused you trouble? She thought about it. Marcus had always been respectful, quiet, almost invisible. He never asked for special treatment, never complained about the food or his cell conditions, never got into fights with other inmates. If anything, he was the kind of prisoner that made her job easier. But now, sitting in his cell in the middle of the night, he was risking everything to warn her about a plot that could get him killed if the other inmates found out he had talked. The radio crackled again, and Maria knew she was out of time. Whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen now. She took a deep breath, made her choice, and prepared for what came next. Maria pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, her mind racing through possibilities. She had 30 seconds before dispatch would send a patrol to check on her. 30 seconds to decide whether to trust a convicted felon or follow protocol that might get her killed. Marcus, she whispered, leaning closer to the bars. If what you're saying is true, I need details. Where exactly are they positioned? Marcus shifted on his bunk, his voice dropping even lower. Rodriguez is hiding in the supply closet near the checkpoint. Thompson's crouched behind the water fountain at the corner. And Jackson, he's the smart one. He's waiting in the blind spot by the emergency exit where the cameras can't see him. Maria's blood ran cold. The blind spot. She knew exactly where he meant. There was a 2-foot gap in camera coverage near the emergency exit that had been a security concern for months. Administration kept saying they'd fix it, but budget cuts meant it never happened. If Jackson was there with a master key, he could unlock any cell on the block within seconds. How did Jackson get that key? She asked, though she dreaded the answer. That's the part that should scare you most, Marcus said, his eyes darting toward the other cells. Guard Thompson's nephew works in maintenance. He's been copying keys for months, selling them to inmates with family money on the outside. Jackson paid $5,000 for that master key. The pieces started falling into place in Maria's mind. Guard Thompson had been acting strange lately, taking extra shifts, avoiding eye contact. She had assumed he was having financial problems, but this was worse than she imagined. Corruption from the inside meant nowhere was safe. Her radio crackled again, more urgently this time. Unit 7, this is dispatch. Respond immediately or we're sending backup to your location. Maria made her decision. She pressed the radio button and forced her voice to sound calm. Unit 7 to dispatch. All clear on Block D. Just had to deal with a minor medical issue with an inmate. Continuing patrol. Copy that, Unit 7. Report back in 20 minutes, 20 minutes. That gave her time to think, to plan, to figure out how to survive what was coming. But first she needed to know everything Marcus knew. Why now? She asked. Why tonight? Marcus looked toward the ceiling, as if checking for listening ears. Because tomorrow morning there's a prisoner transport coming in. High-value inmates from the federal facility upstate. If they can create chaos tonight, take hostages, they can use the confusion to escape when those transport vehicles arrive. Maria felt sick. This wasn't just about hurting her. This was about a coordinated escape attempt that could put dozens of dangerous criminals back on the streets. And somehow she had stumbled into the middle of it. There's something else, Marcus continued, his voice barely a breath. The reason they picked you specifically. It's not random. What do you mean? Your brother, Detective Santos with the Houston PD. He's been investigating a drug ring that connects to some of the families of inmates here. Rodriguez's brother is one of the dealers your brother arrested last month. This is payback. The room seemed to spin around Maria. Her brother Carlos had mentioned a big drug bust recently, but she never connected it to her work at the jail. The idea that someone would target her because of her brother's job had never occurred to her. But it made terrible sense. They know where I live, she whispered, more to herself than to Marcus. They know everything about you. Your schedule, your route to work, your apartment building. Officer Santos, this goes deeper than just tonight. Even if you survive this, they'll try again. Maria's hands were shaking now. She gripped the radio tighter, trying to steady herself. 8 years of training, 8 years of handling dangerous situations, and she had never felt this vulnerable. But she couldn't fall apart. Not now. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. What? If things go bad tonight, if they manage to hurt me, I need you to tell the investigators everything you've told me. Can you do that? Marcus nodded grimly. I'll tell them. But it's not going to come to that. You're smarter than they think you are. Maria looked down the hallway again. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting eerie shadows that seemed to move and shift. Somewhere in those shadows, 3 men were waiting to kill her. And somewhere in the facility's security office, corrupt guards were probably watching, ready to disable cameras or unlock doors at the right moment. But she had one advantage they didn't expect. She knew they were there. Marcus, is there another way out of this block? Something they might not have thought of? He thought for a moment. Then his eyes lit up. The maintenance tunnel. There's an access panel behind the vending machines near cell 22. Leads to the main corridor on Block C. But it's tight and you'd have to crawl. Maria knew the vending machines. They were about 20 yards behind her, in the opposite direction from where the ambush was waiting. If she could make it there without being seen, she might have a chance. But there's a problem, Marcus added. To get to the access panel, you'd have to pass 3 other cells where Rodriguez's friends are housed. If any of them see you and alert the others, the plan was risky, but it was better than walking straight into a trap. Maria checked her watch. 18 minutes until her next check-in. She had to move now. Marcus, if I don't make it, you will, he interrupted. You're tougher than any of them realize. I've watched you handle situations that would break other guards. You can do this. Maria took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and began moving toward the vending machines. Each step felt like it echoed through the entire facility. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure the inmates could hear it. Behind her, she could sense Marcus watching from his cell, probably praying just as hard as she was. As she approached cell 22, she could see the vending machines in the dim light. Just 10 more steps, 5 more steps. She was almost there when she heard it, the sound of metal scraping against concrete. Someone was moving. Maria froze against the wall, her breath catching in her throat. The scraping sound came again, closer this time. Metal dragging across concrete in slow, deliberate movements. Someone was definitely awake, and they were moving with purpose. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, trying to become invisible. The vending machines were only 5 feet away, but those 5 feet might as well have been 5 miles. Between her and safety, she could see the outline of cell 19, where Tommy Valdez was housed. Rodriguez's closest ally, a man serving time for aggravated assault, who had already attacked 2 guards since arriving at the facility. The scraping stopped. Maria held her breath, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Then she heard it, the soft shuffle of bare feet on concrete. Someone was moving in cell 19. A shadow passed across the narrow window of the cell door. Tommy was awake, pacing. Maria could hear him whispering to himself, or maybe talking to someone else. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was agitated, excited, like someone preparing for violence. Maria's radio crackled softly on her shoulder, and she quickly reached up to turn the volume down. But it was too late. The whispering in cell 19 stopped abruptly. The shadow in the window went still. For 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, nothing moved. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs so hard, she was sure it could be heard throughout the entire block. Sweat dripped down her back despite the cool air conditioning. Her hand instinctively moved toward her service weapon, though she knew drawing it would only escalate the situation. Then Tommy's voice drifted through the bars of his cell, casual and conversational, as if he were talking to a friend. "Evening, Officer Santos. Working late tonight?" Maria's blood turned to ice. He knew she was there. The plan was compromised before it had even started. But something in his tone told her he didn't know about Marcus's warning. He thought she was making her normal rounds, walking into their trap exactly as planned. She had two choices. She could retreat back toward Marcus's cell and radio for backup, abandoning any hope of reaching the maintenance tunnel. Or she could play along, pretend everything was normal, and try to buy herself more time. "Just making my rounds, Valdez," she replied, forcing her voice to sound steady and professional. "Everything quiet tonight?" Tommy chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Maria's spine. "Oh, it's been real quiet. But I got a feeling things are about to get interesting." Maria took a careful step toward the vending machines. "Well, try to get some sleep. Morning comes early. You know, Officer Santos," Tommy continued, and she could hear him moving closer to his cell door. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately. About how you walk these halls every night all alone. Thinking you're safe." Another step toward the vending machines. Maria could see the access panel now, partially hidden behind the Pepsi machine. Just 3 more steps and she could start working on the screws that held it in place. "That's nice, Valdez. Sweet dreams." But Tommy wasn't done talking. "See, the thing is, some of us been wondering what would happen if something went wrong on one of your little walks. What would happen if you needed help and nobody could hear you scream?" Maria's hand found her radio, but she didn't press the button yet. If she called for backup now, Tommy would know something was wrong. He'd alert Rodriguez and the others, and they'd either disappear back to their cells or accelerate their timeline. Either way, she'd lose her only advantage. "Valdez, I think you should get back to bed before you say something you'll regret." "Regret?" Tommy laughed louder this time. "Lady, the only thing I regret is not doing this sooner." That's when Maria heard it. The sound she had been dreading. The soft click of a cell door unlocking. Tommy had a key. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Jackson wasn't the only one with access to the cells. They had multiple keys, multiple escape routes, multiple ways to turn this facility into a war zone. Marcus had saved her from walking into the original ambush, but he didn't know about all of them. Maria abandoned stealth and ran toward the vending machines. Behind her, she could hear Tommy's cell door creaking open, his bare feet slapping against the concrete floor as he stepped into the hallway. She reached the Pepsi machine and dove behind it, just as footsteps echoed from the other end of the block. Rodriguez and Thompson were moving too. "She's by the machines," Tommy called out, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Just like Jackson said she would be." Maria's hand shook as she found the access panel. 4 screws held it in place, and she pulled out her multi-tool, working frantically to remove them. The first screw came loose easily, but the second was rusted in place. She could hear footsteps getting closer. Multiple sets now, moving with coordinated precision. "Officer Santos." Rodriguez's voice drifted down the hallway, sickeningly sweet. "We just want to talk to you. Come out where we can see you." The second screw finally gave way, and Maria started on the third. Her hands were slippery with sweat, making it hard to grip the tool. Behind her, she could hear them getting closer, their footsteps mixing with whispered communications. They were hunting her like a pack of wolves. "You know, your brother Carlos caused us a lot of problems," Thompson added, his voice coming from a different direction. "They were spreading out, trying to surround her position. Arrested my cousin last month. Seized 2 kilos of product. Cost us a lot of money." The third screw clattered to the floor, and Maria started on the fourth. This one was tighter than the others, and she had to put her full weight behind the multi-tool to get it to budge. The metal groaned in protest, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet hallway. "We tried to handle this the easy way." Jackson's voice joined the others, coming from directly behind her. "Had some friends on the outside pay your brother a visit. But Carlos is stubborn, just like his sister." Maria's blood froze. They had threatened Carlos, her brother who had 3 kids and a wife, who coached Little League on weekends and volunteered at the food bank every Christmas. They had put her family in danger. And she hadn't even known. The fourth screw finally came free and the access panel swung open. Behind it was a narrow tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Maria could see light at the other end, probably 50 feet away. It would be tight, claustrophobic, and if they caught her halfway through, she'd be trapped like a rat in a pipe. But it was her only chance. She started to climb into the tunnel when a hand grabbed her ankle. "Going somewhere, Officer Santos." Tommy's voice was right behind her, his grip like iron around her leg. Maria kicked backward with her free foot, connecting with something soft. Tommy grunted, and his grip loosened enough for her to pull her leg free. She scrambled into the tunnel, her radio and equipment belt scraping against the narrow walls. Behind her, she could hear them arguing. "Should we follow her?" Thompson asked. "No," Jackson replied. "We know where that tunnel leads. Rodriguez, you and Thompson take the main corridor and cut her off at Block C. Tommy, you're with me." "We're going to pay Marcus Williams a visit." Maria's heart stopped. Marcus, they knew he had warned her, and now they were going to kill him for it. She was crawling through the tunnel as fast as she could, her knees scraping against the rough concrete, but she could already hear them moving away, heading back toward Cell 47. She had to make a choice. Keep crawling toward safety and let Marcus die, or go back and try to save the man who had risked everything to save her. The tunnel stretched ahead of her, dark and narrow, leading to safety and backup and the chance to call for help. But behind her, a good man was about to pay with his life for doing the right thing. Maria closed her eyes, said a prayer, and made her decision. She started crawling backward toward the access panel, toward certain danger, toward a fight she probably couldn't win. But she couldn't live with herself if she let Marcus die for her sake. As she emerged from the tunnel, she could hear Jackson and Tommy's voices getting closer to Marcus's cell. She had maybe 2 minutes before they reached him. 2 minutes to figure out how to save a man's life when she could barely save her own. Maria reached for her radio, but hesitated. Calling for backup would take too long. By the time other guards reached Block D, Marcus would be dead, and his killers would be back in their cells. Pretending to sleep, she needed a different plan. That's when she remembered something Marcus had told her months ago during one of their brief conversations. He had been a soldier before his life went wrong. Special forces, trained in combat, trained to survive. Maybe he wasn't as helpless as she thought. Maybe if she could give him a warning, he could defend himself. Maria crept back toward the cell block, staying in the shadows, her heart pounding with every step. She could see Jackson and Tommy now, moving down the hallway with purpose. Jackson had something in his hand that glinted in the fluorescent light. Not a key this time. Something sharp. She was running out of time. In 30 seconds, they would reach Marcus's cell. In 30 seconds, a good man would die unless she did something. Maria took a deep breath, stepped out of the shadows, and prepared to fight for both their lives. Maria pressed her back against the concrete wall, her service weapon drawn but held low. The fluorescent lights above flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows that made everything feel like a nightmare. She could hear Jackson and Tommy's footsteps getting closer to Marcus's cell, their voices low but urgent. "You sure he's the one who talked?" Tommy whispered. "Has to be," Jackson replied, his voice cold as winter steel. Nobody else on this block would risk their neck for a guard. Williams always was different, thought he was better than the rest of us. Maria's mind raced through her options. She could fire a warning shot, but the sound would bring every guard in the facility running. And in the chaos, Marcus might still end up dead. She could try to take them both down, but Jackson had military training too. And Tommy was built like a linebacker. In a straight fight, she'd probably lose. That's when she remembered the fire alarm. Every cell block had emergency protocols. When the fire alarm sounded, all cell doors automatically locked down, and emergency lighting activated. Would buy her time and trap Jackson and Tommy in the hallway, where backup could find them. She holstered her weapon and sprinted toward the alarm pull station near the security checkpoint. Her boots echoed off the walls and she heard Jackson curse behind her. "She's making a run for it," Tommy called out. "Forget Williams. Get her." Maria reached the alarm and yanked the handle down hard. Immediately, the hallway filled with the deafening wail of sirens and flashing red lights. Emergency protocols kicked in automatically. Cell doors slammed shut with metallic clangs that echoed like thunder. The main corridor doors sealed with heavy clicks. Jackson and Tommy were trapped in the hallway with her. But so was she. "Smart move, Officer Santos," Jackson called out over the alarm. His voice had changed, become more respectful. "But now we're all locked in here together until the fire department arrives. That gives us plenty of time to finish our conversation." Maria drew her weapon again, keeping her back to the wall. The flashing red emergency lights made everything look like a horror movie, casting wild shadows that moved and jumped with each pulse. She could see Jackson and Tommy approaching slowly, methodically, like predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. "This doesn't have to end badly," she called out, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "Backup is already on the way. Surrender now and maybe we can work something out." Jackson laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "Work something out? Lady, we're already looking at life sentences. What's a few more charges?" Tommy spread out to her left, trying to flank her position. Maria swiveled to keep both men in sight, but the flashing lights made it hard to track their movements. Every shadow could hide an attacker. "You know what I think?" Jackson continued, still moving closer. "I think you're bluffing about backup. I think you pulled that alarm hoping to scare us off. But here's the thing about emergency lockdowns. Nobody can get in here until the all-clear is given. And the only person who can give that all-clear is you." Maria's heart sank. He was right. The emergency protocols were designed to contain fires and prevent smoke from spreading through the facility. That meant the hallway was sealed until she manually reset the system. She had trapped herself with 2 killers. "So here's what's going to happen," Jackson said, pulling something from his pocket. In the red flashing light, Maria could see it was a crude knife fashioned from a piece of metal and wrapped with electrical tape. "You're going to reset that alarm. Then you're going to unlock our cells so we can get back to bed. And then you're going to forget this whole night ever happened. And if I don't?" Tommy answered from her left, his voice thick with menace. "Then we make sure you can't tell anybody what you saw tonight permanently." Maria's training kicked in. She had been in dangerous situations before, but never trapped alone with armed inmates. The manual said to de-escalate, to look for compromise, to avoid violence whenever possible. But looking at Jackson's eyes in the flashing red light, she knew there would be no compromise tonight. "You're making a mistake," she said, raising her weapon. "I've already called this in. Other guards know exactly where I am." "No, you haven't," Jackson replied confidently. "Because if you had, you wouldn't have pulled that fire alarm. You would have waited for backup. The fact that you're trapped in here with us tells me you're flying solo, Officer Santos. Just like your brother when he arrested Rodriguez's family." The mention of her brother made Maria's anger flare. These men had threatened her family, corrupted guards, and turned her workplace into a battlefield. They had forced Marcus to risk his life just to warn her about their plans. Enough was enough. "You want to know the truth?" Maria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Marcus Williams isn't the only one who talked. Half the inmates on this block are tired of your games. They're tired of living in fear while you and your friends turn this place into your personal kingdom." Jackson's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "You're lying, am I? Ask yourself why nobody else came to help you tonight. Ask yourself why the other cells stayed quiet when that alarm went off. Maybe your reign of terror isn't as popular as you think." Tommy glanced nervously at Jackson. "She's just trying to mess with our heads." But Maria could see doubt creeping into Jackson's eyes. In a place like this, paranoia was a survival tool. The suggestion that other inmates might be working against them was exactly the kind of psychological warfare that could break apart their alliance. 3 hours later, when the smoke cleared and backup finally arrived, Jackson and Tommy were found unconscious in the hallway. Maria had used their own paranoia against them, turning allies into enemies until they turned on each other. Marcus Williams was relocated to protective custody and later testified in the corruption trial that sent 5 guards to prison. The drug ring connected to Rodriguez's family was completely dismantled, thanks to the evidence Maria helped uncover that night. Sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the darkest places. Marcus Williams proved that redemption is possible even behind bars. And Officer Maria Santos learned that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right when everything is falling apart. Their story reminds us that in our darkest moments, Hope can come from the most unexpected places.